Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Ophelia here, and thank you so much for joining me today. As I play around in my journal, I am starting off with just gluing down some random bits of paper. And these random bits can be found in my Etsy shop under Collage Packs, but I'm using that medium to glue them down. It's either Liquitex or golden, but I just usually keep it in the squeeze bottle because I buy it by the gallon. And I'm following that up with a thin layer of Liquitex Gesso. And while it's still wet, I'm going to grab some pastel pencils, Faber-Castell, and I'm just simply using this to make some marks. I just like the marks that a pastel pencil or any pencil makes in wet gesso, as it just gives me an extra layer of texture, I guess. So I'm going to let that dry up for a bit and we will keep going. I'm going to pull out some acrylic paints and put those on my palette. I basically have my go-to colors, Lucas, Sennelier Abstract, and a pink Martha Stewart. And I did start by putting on my gloves in a bottle, as I usually begin with my brush and end up with my hands. But I'm just using some reds and oranges and yellows and a fluorescent magenta, and I'm honestly just playing around with some colors, building the background, drying things in between, going back in, lightening some things up, just because I want to add some stamping and such like that. So I'm gonna just put down this first layer, dry it up, and keep going. I went to my stash and found an old stamp. I'm literally using these stamps for just adding some layers. One is the small ones that I'm working with in the heart are Paper Bag Studios by Robin Marie Smith, and I'm using some red archival ink. And then that script stamp that I used first, it's been in my stash for such a long time. I honestly don't remember where I got it because I've had it for so long. I let that dry, the archival ink dry, even though it was archival. I just put down just let it dry a little bit because that next layer I did not want to move around. And then I pulled out my Donna Downey Studios stencil and just sprayed over some acrylic ink in red, Indian yellow, and white. And then as I was drying it, I realized that I feel as though those dots were just a bit too much for the page. So once I let that dry, I'm going to come back with a wash of yellow and white, just a thin wash of that, just to kind of knock some of those dots back into the background. I'm going to let that dry and just keep going. I found a Donna Downey stencil as well as some Dina Wakley stamps and a stencil that I'm going to use with some black Matisse paint and a makeup sponge to run it through the stencil. And then I'm going to audition that other stencil just to make sure things are going to fit. I always get really nervous when I do paint through a stencil just to make sure that things don't mush underneath. So I'm carefully dabbing off some of the paint on my palette just so any extra paint won't run through the stencil. And then I get this Dina Wakley other stencil, and I'm just going to use a black Stabilo Marxall to go around it because I kind of want to create, I guess, like I want the figures to look as though they're shadows and like in a shadowy mist. So I'm using this Stabilo Marxall pencil that I will later come back and I guess, activate it with some water. But for now, I'm just tracing around it and hoping that what's in my head is going to transfer to my journal. I then decide to get a piece of white scrap paper and paint it that turquoise color because I want the stamped image that I plan to use to stand out a bit more on the page. So while that paper's drying, I'm just going to go around these other stencils with a wet paintbrush with just water, just to kind of activate that lead a bit and kind of soften it up again. What's in my head, I'm hoping will transfer to the journal page. So I'm just going around these with a bit of water. I'm going to dry that blue piece of paper that I plan to stamp on, as well as dry the Stabilo marks all where I added the water. And I'm going to stamp that image onto this blue piece of paper. But I realized I needed to go off into a drawer and find a block that I can use to get a clean image. And I'm just stamping it with some black archival ink. And I will use my scissors here to cut out that image. And then I'm going to use a regular glue stick just to adhere that blue one down to the page. I then found on my desk it's a Derwent Inktense block that had broken, so I left it on my desk. And I started using it to add a bit of color to one of the stencils. And then I thought I would create almost like shadows around the edge of the page. And I think this is where everything just simply goes downhill, because I wanted it to be literally like the outline of the stencils were coming out of the shadows. Or maybe I was thinking I wanted it to be like a dark curtain. I'm not sure, but all I know is that it just wasn't dark enough. And so I went back and re-outlined the edges of the stencil with the Stabilo, and as it was, I even tried to get a bigger brush to make things darker, and that didn't work out. So I wiped that away, and it's like, okay, Ophelia, let it go, leave it, no, don't touch it. But I keep going back in, and eventually, while I was drying it, I put the Inktense block down on its side and like scraped in some darker edges of color. However, it just still wasn't dark enough, as you can see. So I went and pulled out some Payne's Gray paint and thought that I could help make it dark to even look as though you're looking in from a curtain. At this point, I'm not even sure of what I was trying to do other than just make the dark far darker. And so I used that Payne's Gray. And then I got some acrylic paint markers, and at this phase of the game, it was literally like disaster recovery. I was just trying to just do something where I would not feel as though I wanted to necessarily just rip the page out and leave it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. At this point, I literally was just done. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thanks as always for watching, and I hope you'll subscribe. Bye-bye.